Hi, this is a recorded presentation that I'm doing for the GEMS meeting. And the whole presentation is regarding how we are promoting data use through DHIS2 across PSI. My name is Martin, and I'm the Deputy Director responsible for evidence within the organization. So, a good place to start this presentation is maybe by highlighting how important DHIS2 is to PSI as an organization. So what you see right now on the screen is a map showing all the places where we are currently implementing DHIS2. That's everything in green, and the places where we are about to implement it, and those are the places in blue. So in total, there's about 37 countries that are either using DHIS2 as we speak within PSI or in the process of having it implemented. So it's basically an important global information management system for the organization. If you think beyond PSI, DHIS2 is also being used by 47 different ministries of health as the National Management Information System. So this isn't only important to PSI, but DHIS2 is also important to the ministries of health as well. So let me give a bit of background about where this presentation is going. So what we're trying to do as an organization is to make sure that every time you think about DHIS2, you think about data to action, which is basically making sure that we're making the best use of the data that we collect to improve the way that we implement. And every time you think about data to action, you think about better health outcomes for Sarah. So basically, we're trying to make sure that as an organization, you make the connection between why we have DHIS2, what we do with the data, and how we use data affects Sarah's health outcomes. So how are we going to get there? Basically, there's two main things that I'd like to highlight within this presentation that are to do with DHIS2 and data use. The first one is around data to action frameworks. So a lot of you are probably familiar with the data to action framework, and at some point you've maybe used one or been involved in developing one. And the way I like to think about data to action frameworks is a job aid for the data user. So this is the thing that helps the person who is using the information understand how to optimize the use of that information, how to make the best use of the information. So if I give you an example, this is a typical visualization that you find in DHIS2. This particular one you're looking at is from Zimbabwe, and it's focused on a circumcision project. So if you look at the visualization as it stands now, it's very difficult for you to determine, what you're looking at, why this information is important, and most importantly, what do people actually do when they receive this information? How do people react to this information? So this is why we started the whole idea of having a data to action framework. And so what you see now on the right hand side is an example of that. So it's basically an explanation that tells you what indicator you're looking at, where the source information comes from. So for example, for this particular one, it comes from a facility register, why you're looking at the information, so the objective of having the information in front of you in the first place, and most importantly, the action plan, meaning what exactly are you going to do with the information once you have it in front of you. So we've realized that as an organization, it's very important for us to have this information sitting right next to the data, because there's a lot of people out there who either don't know why we're collecting the information or may not necessarily know how best to use it once the information is in front of them. So we've been encouraging countries to try and make sure that every time you develop a dashboard or a visualization, you have this basic information associated with that visualization next to it. What you'll see in this action plan that is in front of you now is that we've got information regarding what you're supposed to do when the target is met. So for this particular visualization, what they say is you need to appraise the team for their performance and make sure that you're taking any lessons learned and applying them in other low performing areas. And then you'll also see that it tells you what you should do when the target isn't met. And for this particular instance, it's about investigating. And what is presented here is a series of questions that you should be asking yourself when you're looking at the data. So, for example, this is data to do with male circumcisions. So, anytime the target isn't met, some of the things that they need to be considering is, for example, were there any challenges with regards to transportation? Or did they have an issue with commodities associated with circumcision? Or did they actually have enough service delivery team members on the ground involved in undertaking the circumcision? So, any one of these things could have resulted in us not actually meeting our target. So, the data to action framework works as a good reminder for the person who's looking at the data to think about some of these things when they're trying to investigate what exactly went wrong with the data. And that basically represents good practice. That's what a good data to action framework looks like. So, as we've started to roll out these data to action frameworks, what we've noticed is that sometimes people put an action plan that simply says investigate the poor performance and plan accordingly. So, this doesn't really tell you what you need to do. So, it doesn't really explain how you can use the data. So, what we've been trying to encourage countries is to be a bit more prescriptive within the action plan by maybe focusing on what key questions should you think about when you're looking at the data, when the performance is good or bad. And that makes it easier for people to understand how to use the data. So, having a data to action framework right next to the data, very important, very critical, and it's a very good way of encouraging people to actually make use of the data each time they engage with it. The next thing that we're trying to do is to make sure that anytime we have a story to tell associated with the data, we want to make sure that that story sits right next to the data. So I'm going to give you an example to do with social media. So what you're looking at here is a picture that was put by someone on social media. When you're having a look at the picture alone, it's very difficult for you to determine what exactly you're looking at, why you're looking at it in the first place, why it's important, and so on. So, what you find with Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms, they give you a chance actually to put a story right next to the visualization that you're looking at. So, for example, this is something that I got from Oprah Winfrey's Instagram page. So, Oprah Winfrey is a famous celebrity. So, and as you can see, she made it clear what we were looking at by saying it's another breathtaking view. Hashtag I love New Zealand. So straight away, you know that this is Oprah Winfrey in the picture, and you know that she's in New Zealand. So it's putting context to what you're looking at in the picture. And then social media allows people to go one step further and actually comment on something that someone else has put up. So even if it's not you who put something up, it's easy for you to come in and to put your interpretations associated with what you're looking at. So let's look at exactly the same thing from a data perspective. If you've got a certain visualization on your dashboard, this visualization only gives you half the story. So, what exactly happened with regards to performance, why performance was good or bad, isn't actually demonstrated in the dashboard. The dashboard only tells you whether you did well or you didn't do well. So, what we've been trying to do is to encourage people to make use of the DHIS2 data interpretation features to tell a story right next to the data. So now what you see on the left hand side is a best practice example where you've got your visualization and you've got different members of the team actually having conversations regarding the data. So if anytime someone actually looks at this data, they can see the story right next to the data, and that way they don't actually misinterpret what they're looking at. Many times, this story will sit either in someone's head or it will sit in someone's email because there was an email conversation regarding the data, and so on. So, what we're trying to do is to make sure that teams are putting the stories right next to the data, and it makes it easy. It gives the full picture with regards to how we are implementing our interventions. So, yes, that's the big thing that we're trying to do, data to action frameworks, and also to encourage people to make better use of the interpretation features. So, if I give you an example of how to do it, it's pretty easy to put in an interpretation. The same way when you go on Facebook or Instagram, it's very easy. All you need to do is to press one button and you provide a comment to someone's picture or something. It's exactly the same with DHIS2 and interpretation features. There is one button that you can press, and that's about it. As soon as you press the button, whatever you decide to type in goes and sits right next to the visualization that you are targeting. So this is a screenshot example of someone who's put in a comment associated with this visualization here. And as you can see with this same visualization, you've also got the data to action framework sitting right next to it as well. So it sort of represents the best practice that we're seeking. Um, yeah, and just to give you a live example of how to put in a comment. So this is basically the dashboard for the GEMS project, one of the dashboards that you use within the GEMS project. And what you're looking at here is the positivity rate data. So when I was looking at this earlier, I noticed that Vietnam, there seems to be variation in terms of the positivity rate. So I have a question sitting here in Los Angeles, and I can basically share an interpretation with everyone who has access to this dashboard to ask a question regarding what I'm looking at. And the question I had in my mind was, what exactly is driving the variation in positivity rate for Vietnam? Because I could see Vietnam had a lot more variation than the other countries. And my question is it to do with seasonality? And I put that in, I click share, and straight away, that information goes onto the dashboard. Same way as with Instagram or with Facebook, you put in a comment, the person can see it straight away. And you can see that's my comment right there. Um, so what can you actually use interpretations for? So what do we need to be talking about in DHIS2 right next to the visualizations? So there's a number of things you can be doing. So first of all, you can actually discuss with other colleagues regarding performance. So if you're sitting in headquarters and there's someone sitting in the region and you look at the dashboard and you see something happening with their data for the region, you can simply ask them a question. You can say, hey, I've noticed that performance isn't going so well. What exactly is going on? So, and between you, you can have a dialogue to talk about what's happening with performance. And this way, whatever you're discussing is actually recorded in the system and it's there as part of the story of how we implement our interventions. Another thing you can do is, as a team, you can decide that every month or every week after you have your team meeting, whatever summary you have regarding performance, you're going to put that in as an interpretation right next to the visualization that you're dealing with. Because if you do it this way, it means that the story associated with how things are going ends up right next to the data in DHIS2 rather than ending up on meeting notes in someone's email or on a shared drive. Another thing you can use the interpretation features for is flagging up data quality issues. So this is something that we're seeing in some of the countries where we've been implementing, whereby if you're sitting in headquarters and you notice something that seems a bit weird about the data, you can send a data quality question to the field to say, for example, the numbers here look very, very high compared to previous periods. Could the issue be data quality? And then there can be a discussion around it. And again, all this is recorded in the system, so you have a record of it. Whether it's 2 years from now, 5 years from now, you can always go back and reference this information in the system. Another thing you can do is use the interpretation features to request changes to your dashboards or your data from the M&E team. So if you're a program person running an intervention and you're looking at your dashboard and there's something that you want to change, if you want to add a target line or change the periods, for example, and you don't know how to do it yourself, you can use those features to send a message to the M&E team. This way, there's a nice clean record of all the requests that are going through to the M&E team instead of everyone sending the request via email. So this way it creates transparency around the work that the M&E team are going to be doing. Um, so the interpretation features have now been in DHIS2. We started using them actually with Cambodia in 2013, and then there was an issue with the system, and interpretation stopped working. But since April last year, they've been reactivated, and many countries across PSI have started to adopt using them. So if for example I go here where it shows me all the new interpretations that are coming in, um, I can show you a few examples of interpretations from different countries. So this one shows the latest one that I put in today, and I can simply even go in and like it, same way you do in Facebook or Instagram. Um, and all these lines that you see here represent interpretations from elsewhere. So this is from Zimbabwe, for example. The next one we're looking at now is from Mozambique. Again, someone talking about the data there. The next one is from Tanzania. Then we also have another one from Cameroon. So as you can see, there's quite a few countries who are now using the features. And all this, if you look at the dates are pretty recent. So all the interpretations that have been gliding through now are the ones that have been happening in March. So this is happening as we speak day by day. So there's been a few complaints regarding the use of the interpretation features, and we're slowly trying to react to those complaints and trying to make the features a lot better. But that shouldn't stop you from using them now, because quite a few countries have been using them and they're already seeing the benefits of having all this story associated with implementation in DHIS2. But let me highlight some of the updates that are coming our way. So first of all, very soon there's going to be the ability for you to tag someone in a comment when you're putting in an interpretation using the at button. So the same way in Facebook or in Instagram, you can tag someone so that they can see the comment and the comment is directed at them. You're going to be able to do that in DHIS2. The other thing that you're going to be able to do is every time you tag someone, there'll be an instant email notification to their inbox on whatever you've tagged them on, so that they'll be alerted that an interpretation has been made that is for their attention. So this way, exactly the same way as some of the other social media features, it gives you another chance to know that there's an interpretation waiting for you even before you log into DHIS2. The next thing is we want to try and make sure that there's a daily or weekly summary email that gives you all the highlights of the interpretations that have come in during that period. And it's going to be very flexible. You'll be able to choose which interpretations you want to follow depending on the dashboards that you have access to. So everything that we're doing is to try and make the user experience in DHIS2 very similar to that of Facebook or Instagram, so that it's easier for you to engage with the data. And by doing this, you don't have to always have your data conversations via email, and you don't have to store data conversations in emails, in meeting notes, and so on. Everything will be in one place. And if anyone is wondering, how is the intervention doing? So how is the project doing? They go into DHIS2, they see the data, and if you're not performing as well as you should be, there is an explanation right there, even before anyone asks any questions or sends any emails. So let's bring it all together. What does best practice look like when it comes to data use and DHIS2? So This basically, this what you're seeing on the screen now presents best practice, whereby you've got your nice visualizations on your dashboard, and each of your visualizations are benchmarked with a target, so that if anyone is looking at the data, they understand what is good performance and what is not good performance. The next thing is, right next to the data, you've got the data to action framework. So again, if anyone is looking at the dashboard, they understand what they're looking at, why it's important, and what you're supposed to be doing with the data routinely. And then finally, routine interpretations of the data as the data comes in. So every time you have a refresh in the data, if the data is weekly or monthly, there is an interpretation explaining what's happening with performance and what, telling the story behind the data. So if you can manage to have all three things on your dashboards, that represents best practice. And this is not only for PSI, this is something that we are even trying to promote externally as well. So every time we go in to try and talk to government about how best to use DHIS2, this is what we want to be selling. But in order to be able to do that, we need to try and do that within our organization first. So to round it up, what we're trying to do is to tell a better story about how we are supporting Sarah over time using DHIS2. And the way we want to do it is by making sure that these three components are represented every time someone looks at a dashboard. Thank you.